A Freudian slip is a well enough known thing. It's one of the great examples of how no matter how much everyone disregards Freud and considers him like old news, he remains a great sort of theoretical presence among everyone. Because it's one of those things that like everyone just fucking accepts, and when they notice it, they regard it as a very insightful phenomenon to be aware of, even if they're not like analytically, theoretically, procedurally aware of it or other such phenomena. A Freudian slip is, of course, when your unconscious speaks through you. It's when you say something that you did not intend, you did not consciously mean to communicate, but nonetheless, that which you did say was like the truth according to you, even though you didn't mean to say it. It's a truth that escapes from you. It's something that you were repressing or orbiting. It's something that was beneath your conscious intention, which slipped through your conscious intention. So it's true even though it's not what you meant. That's a Freudian slip. That's a well enough known thing. I have a concept, which is the Marxian slip. Now, the Marxian slip is, I believe similarly, it's something that whenever you actually observe, it doesn't matter how much you don't want to believe Marx or think he's that important or whatever. It just proves in practice that this is important to to recognize. The Marxian slip is an already existent phenomenon. It's not theoretical. I'm naming something which I believe has been going on a great deal. A Marxian slip is it's when you consciously express the subconscious meaning of another, someone other than you. And by doing so, it's not just that you tell them, this is what you think. It's still a slip, but it's like a form of inception. It's a pragmatically proven form of inception. Inception, of course, being, everyone knows the film, and the actual word, which is explained pretty clearly in the film, even if you don't understand dream loops and time, blah, 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 blah. Inception is just like creating an idea in another. It's like causing someone else to have their own idea, and you made it happen, but like they had it as their own. That's inception. So the Marxian slip is an extremely frequent, successful form of inception. And I love how in Inception, the whole sort of thing, the shtick of it is like, no one's ever done it. No one even knows if it's possible. How could we ever incept anything? When you really understand Inception, you look around a little bit. Inception's going on all the motherfucking time. It's actually a very common phenomenon. And this is one of the most successful practices to actually achieve inception without fucking psychonauting. So a Marxian slip is when you sort of lead someone through their own conscious intended meaning and sort of fabricate the conversational conditions and get them to essentially oust their subconscious meaning. And it can be that like they say it, but you're very much the one that made it occur, or it can be that you say it and it's like in a context of talking with them, but what you are saying is very much like from them, you know, like you're steel manning or something such like that, like, oh, I'm just sort of, is this what you mean or that? But you say it in such a way that you know this is what they really mean, even though they don't even know that they mean that. And you do so in such a way that you highlight the contradiction in their consciousness. By bringing this to light, you you enframe the unity that exists, that is them, between their consciously intended meaning, which is directly contradicting their subconsciously expressed meaning, and you're the one that gets it out of them. This is the Marxian slip. So it is a Freud. The Marxian slip is, in a sense, it is a kind of Freudian slip. Because if you're a little loose with what is a Freudian slip, one could strictly say a Freudian slip is just, it's merely individualist. It's simply this particular person has their particular unconscious escape them in particular. That's sort of how everyone thinks about the Freudian slip. But I think it's sort of actually more helpful theoretically to regard a Freudian slip as simply meaning generally the unconscious escaped consciousness. That's all it actually is. And not to get too Jungian, because he fucking was basically a Satanist. But the Marxian slip is a kind of Freudian slip which is specifically social. It is a socialized Freudian slip. Not just that it's, it is emergent in a collective environment. Because you can have a non-Marxian Freudian slip, a classical Freudian slip among multiple. I believe that's a perfectly coherent concept. There's agreement among parties, and one slips the meaning of the other, and they simply together go on the way an individual does, they repress it. That would not be a Marxian slip. A Marxian slip is it's an act of struggle. It's specifically a perception of one of the contradiction in the other, and acting upon that, they essentially castrate the other, to continue to be Freudian, but I don't think I want to go into that. They essentially reveal the contradiction of the other in an undeniable way, in precisely the way that the unconscious is revealed and can't really be argued with, because it's pre-theoretical, it's subconscious. Alright, so why is the Marxian slip Marxian? It's not just that I spoke the lingo a bit, that it's struggle. It's social, and why is it social? Because it represents a necessary integration within the totality of socialized civilization, because it represents struggle, because it represents the existence of mutually opposed parties. It represents structures being in place in such a way that and a collective Freudian slip does not. A collective Freudian slip can simply be, a pre-class tribe sort of having a slip. Whereas a Marxian slip demonstrates that struggle has been going on and has reached the level of normalization to be made method and become conversational, and all of that was sort of implied in what I was saying, and that's important. That's not really the main reason I think it's smart to call it Marxian. You should sort of be aware of that I have this sociological meaning in the Marxian slip, but I feel like it could be named such it could be named other than such, and sort of mean these things, and you wouldn't necessarily use the same language, but why actually more so, why I think it makes the most sense to call this the Marxian slip is actually to do with the kind of tradition of Marxist theoreticians. Because the Marxist slip, the Marxian slip, it just sounds better. The Marxian slip, it's this kind of like automatically discovered method within debate. It's like the MacGuffin of debate, the thing you chase. Like within a particular debate, it's like kind of not necessarily how you like win, but like certainly how you score points. People doing this all the fucking time in any argument, and this is why I think it's a much more common and easy to recognize thing today. It's not necessarily new, it's just common, because we have this like, the online culture now of constant warring cliques, lots of argument, and so it's been revealed how sort of normal this is. So the Marxian slip, you manifest the self-contradiction of the other. This is sort of how to effectively debate, not merely in terms of demonstrating informational prowess or something. Like it's not necessarily to do with like insight in a broader sense. It's like it's a rhetorical like dribble. It's like you got one over them. And I want to call this the Marxian slip because actually when you go through the fucking literature of the Marxists, like back to Marx and Engels, what they were doing, like most of what they were doing in particular, because there were no Marxist states or whatever, it was just like, they were committed, active sort of political agents, of course, but they didn't hold power, so that was not like they were doing a very different style of general life activity, and a lot of what they were doing was literally fucking debate lording, 100%, absolute shit ton. When you actually go read what these guys wrote down a lot, you don't just fucking read the manifesto because your teacher thinks it's cute. You actually like try and understand what the fuck they're talking about, and therefore engage with all sorts of things. Like you find yourself in the Gotha program or something. You find yourself in the poverty of philosophy. And kind of the funniest book of all time to me, the best example of it is Anti-Düring. What these guys are doing all the fucking time was this like debating, this arguing, and I think a major sort of attribute of Marxist theoreticians that, to the degree that this is how you know them effectively, like pragmatically speaking, like in practice, in real time, how you know a Marxist from a non-Marxist, genuinely, because it comes from this tradition, is they are the most effective at this technique. Because there's a great tradition of employing this technique. And it makes sense. It's like theoretically rational that such is the case, because like the whole sort of thing, if you like accept the worldview of like Marx and Engels and blah blah blah, is that this dialectical materialism is like a total worldview, and it's like the only like true total worldview because it's the culmination of the totality of Western sort of thought and culture in a unified manner. It's the sublation of art and religion and science and the modern sense and everything. And philosophy, obviously. So, you know, if you accept all that, it makes sense that these guys are just going to be like better at understanding how the people who don't have that understanding are very misinformed. And therefore they're good at doing this. Because, like I said, when you treat it like in this pure sociological way, it doesn't sound too explicitly Marxian when you think about it, because just everyone fucking does this. And if you just choose to employ a different sort of linguistic framework, then it will not come across as particularly Marxian. But the way in which I believe it is so fucking Marxian is that the Marxian tradition, essentially, is like the elites of this technique. Like the big heads, you know? The bigger the head in the symbolism is, like, the better they are at doing this when you go and read them. And, like, the more you read the opposite side that they're arguing with, the more you get better at understanding that, like, he got you. You know? Like, your self-contradiction has been demonstrated in this very flowing way, and you were part of it. He led you to the slaughter. So, and I want to call it that as well because, like I said, this is such a common thing. I mean, just all the fucking debate bros and YouTube or Twitch or whatever the fuck, the better they get at debate lording, literally, the more they do this, and the better they get at doing it. Because, like I said, this is just the MacGuffin of debate. This is just how you score points. Is you demonstrate that the other is self-contradictory, that their intended meaning, I know maybe it was just in a manipulative way, like they were just bullshitting you, or maybe even better, that they actually believed a certain thing consciously, but either way, that their intended meaning is contradicted by this, like, more subconscious meaning, which undergirds the, like, it preconditions the very fabric of their intended meaning, and is therefore, like, undeniable within that context, and that they demonstrate this contradiction, and you get them to demonstrate this contradiction. You, like, fucking frame the situation in such a way that the contradiction is inevitable. This is how you highlight that, like, I know what the fuck I'm talking about, and he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. That's what it is. It's the best way to do that ever. So the Marxian Slip is, like I said, the Marxian tradition, the sort of the heads of Marxism that sustain it through history, are like the great masters of the Marxian Slip. But the Marxian tradition, I think, in a sense, like, it inherits the Marxian Slip as a kind of tendency generally within Western philosophy. But it's still, nonetheless, I still regard it as determinately Marxian, because it's through Marxism that the Marxian Slip sort of acquires just some sort of element of consolidation. Like, it was sort of a less regular thing. I mean, essentially, so an essential component of the Marxist tradition is a sense of critique, basically, which comes from Western philosophy. And the Marxian Slip essentially is like the it's the moment of critique. I mean, critique, of course, being more of like a broader process of engagement, but like the Marxian slip is like the quilt of critique. It's like when you like get it all together, you make the punch. So what critique is, as opposed to criticism, criticism is merely like highlighting or describing some sense of like what is wrong with something else, and it's like in essence it's not tied to the essence of the thing. It can be sort of like externally imposed. It's a matter of like, well, putting it alongside this further context, this isn't good enough. Criticism can be useful, but it's not sort of something that will like necessarily unravel the criticized thing. That's what critique does. If you critique properly, critique sort of demonstrates the inevitable failure of a given thing, because what critique is, in contrast, is taking something on its own terms, like treating its own like essence as a given, and then following that to its necessary conclusion without like directly contradicting it in any sort of external way, and just allowing it to contradict itself by following it according to its own logic to its end. That's what critique means. And critique is actually the essential method by which any great Western philosopher sort of marks themselves out. They like are in critique of some prior context. This goes back kind of all the way, where like Plato was in response to that there was the pre-Socratic situation of like the you know, that being is like one being is itself versus the Heraclitean all motion, and then Plato is trying to like emerge from that and sublate it through this endless process of critique. And you know, to skip a few steps, Kant is sort of the most famous today among Western thinkers. Kant is very explicitly, well, you know, obviously critique of blah blah blah, that's this whole thing, but I mean, also just understanding it in this sort of general way, Kant isn't just like critiquing pure reason and practical reason and blah blah blah. Kant is like explicitly critiquing the kind of schools of thought that come before him, and of course his terms of like the rationalists and whatever become the norm of describing them, because he so vigorously sort of frames them and like, escapes them through this process. And what he's doing is critique, as I described. And then Hegel, of course, critiques Kant among everyone else ever. And actually, so what Hegel does is Hegel essentially creates Marxism, or at least the skeleton of Marxism, by taking this sort of notion of critique and just taking it to its absolute extreme and allowing it to permeate the whole of thought, like ever at all possible. Because like I said, this notion of how you take a given thing and you highlight how it contradicts itself. So obviously that's just dialectics. But the thing is, critique was sort of this thing where that's sort of one of the things you do. It's not what you're doing all the time, but it's sort of like the underlying thrust of an overall form of thought or of argument, and it's like what orients your argument by relating it to prior context. But it's not the constant and in all cases nature of the movement of your thought. That's the distinction between just critique generally and then dialectics. Dialectics is essentially the universalization of critique throughout the totality of thought. It's endless critique. It's nothing but critique in all cases. So Hegel's Phenomenology, his first book, is essentially an exploration of just the infinite permutations of critiquing critique all throughout humanity. That's kind of what the phenomenology is. That like there's this thing, and it finds itself as this thing, and then the critique of this thing is this, and that being the critique of this thing is this, and then there's the critique of that, and that. Like that's actually a good way to put it. And then, of course, Marxism is essentially just taking that fundamental flow, which is the dialectical method, and grounding it on like a clinical observation of material reality, as opposed to any form of idealized thoughts or forms that are defined in any particularly static way or in any sense other than simply like observing pragmatically. Right, so that all of that's sort of a boring little history, like the transference from Western academia to Marxist politics through the Hegelian moment. That's a thing that happened. But part of what happened there is that the Marxian slip was essentially, like I said, consolidated. That some sort of like some sort of like rough version of the Marxian slip was certainly present in like Kant, or even going back to fucking Plato, whatever the fuck. Like that was essentially what they were doing. But I think it's in Hegel where, like, it's in the movement from critique as like a sort of general like context of approach to dialectics as the constant in all cases application of the moment of critique. That's where the Marxian slip goes from being this sort of possible thing that can be done, this like general tendency among thinkers to like mark out that this is where I'm right, like why I'm insightful as opposed to this other thing, with some level of effectiveness. Once you get to dialectics in the proper modern sense, then it becomes like the Marxian slip is this just procedurally inevitable, like necessary component of demonstrating like pragmatic superiority in all sorts of cases ever. It's not going to be bound to like any kind of realm of academic disputes, which it was somewhat. Now it's just like, this is how I think we can build this fucking factory. Well, this is how I think we can build this fucking factory. And who's going to win is like, well, like you think this, and you think this, and you think this. But what about this and this? Aha! So you're full of shit. You have no fucking clue. So this is how we should build a factory. Like, Marxism takes the Marxian slip from being this sort of like this pompous technique of the writers, and imbues it into like the essence of exploratory debate that propels practical activity. and therefore it just becomes everyday life. So that's another way of putting why it is Marxian. But also it's Marxian because, like, who the fuck else told you about this concept? So I get to name it. There you go.